Hi, I'm Harris Ferrell, the CEO of APDS, and I'm joined with Chris Wilson, our Director of Engagement and also the author of the Master Plan. To kick off our conversation this afternoon, we'd like to start with a brief video just to lay some context for the conversation we're going to have around education in an incarcerated context.
I've spent almost half of my life in prison, so 16 years. I was raised in a very violent neighborhood. Every couple of months, we had to go bury somebody. People came after me, and I ended up taking a person's life. I knew in my heart that I was a good person. I just decided that I just wanted to turn my life around, and so I just started writing up a plan. Embracing my education could be my way out of prison. I call it a positive delusion. I had to delude myself to believe that I would get out somehow. It allowed me to get up every day and work really hard at school and study and really embrace it. When I wrote the master plan, I sent a copy of it to my judge. 10 years had went by, and the judge says, "I'll let you out, but you have to finish this master plan." And so they gave me a chance. So I feel like it's my job to go back into these communities and create pathways and show people how beautiful the world is and what's possible.
So thank you. And let me just give a quick framing about APDS, and then we'll dive into our conversation. So at APDS, we have the vision that we will eliminate the revolving door of corrections. We're a public benefit corporation, a certified B Corp, and we provide a digital learning platform, data platform used inside of correctional facilities to deliver individualized education, rehabilitation, job training, and reentry support to incarcerated learners. We pursue an ethical model where we never charge the incarcerated individual nor their friends or family for the use of our technology or services. We contract directly with the Departments of Corrections to enable the DOC staff to provide meaningful and consequential programming inside of the correctional facility with the goal of really transforming that facility into an educational center. We're deployed in over 90 facilities in 17 different states, ranging from juvenile to maximum security, parole, probation, and even alternatives to incarceration. So for the first part of this conversation, Chris, I'd like for you to share with our viewers what it's like inside a prison to pursue educational options, starting with just what's the process like to sign up and get access to programming?
Sure. So the initial process is once you get into prison, you need to figure out who is your case manager. And usually your case manager is extremely overworked. There's dozens and dozens of people on his or her caseload. And you submit a request if you want to get into a program. if you're under 21, it's mandatory that you go to school and try to get your high school diploma. And so you put in a request, and for your GED, like you can get in, but for vocational shops and for college and for other programs, they tend to look at your sentence. And if you're close to release, then you'll have a better chance of getting into the program. But if you have, let's say, a 50-year sentence or a 30-year sentence, they won't let you get in until you're closer to release, because they figure, like, why bother giving you an education if you're not getting out anytime soon?
Yeah, so tell us then about the fellow students that you encountered in the different correctional programs that you pursued.
Sure. So it's an interesting dynamic in the classroom. Are you getting feedback?
Yeah, there's some feedback. I don't know if the technician can mute the ASU 19 channel for us, please.
Yes.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a one-room classroom where a bunch of students, probably 20 to 30 students, all at different educational levels. Some can read a little bit. Some may have like some college or like some technical experience. So there's one teacher that has to manage all of these students that have these different learning abilities. And again, like, it's limited enrollment, and you have some folks who don't want to listen, some people who really want to learn. So it's a very challenging environment for teachers to teach and also for students to learn in.
Yeah, you talked about one of your classmates, DV. You want to share a bit about what that story was like?
Yeah, so when I went to prison, I actually had a life sentence, and I really figured my way out of prison was through educating myself and programming. And I started studying and being mentored by my friend Steven, and we would come out every day and work outside of the classroom and study. And so Dee was one person who was like kind of the tough guy in the housing unit, just played basketball all day and talked on the phone. But he would watch us, and he would watch us like study. And sometimes he would stand over top of us and just, try to like peek and see what we were learning. But then when I finally got my high school diploma, and then I got into college, he eventually walked up to us and was like, I thought you guys was just over here, playing, and would you guys be willing to mentor me? And so we started mentoring him, and he got his high school diploma in like, I think maybe 2 or 3 months. And it sent a powerful message to the housing unit, because everyone was like, if Dee can get his high school diploma, like, so can I. And then that started a train of, dozens of people that we mentor. And not only just high school diplomas, like we started getting people into college. So it was beautiful.
That's awesome. And what's the dynamic in the classroom itself when you've got students of a wide range of abilities who are all trying to learn at once and kind of at the same time?
Unfortunately, it's a struggle. And I would say mostly for the teacher and then the students it was a lot of people when I was incarcerated who had learning disabilities. And so it was a big struggle for them to keep up. And then, teachers had to leave after the session. So there wasn't really a way for some students who had disabilities to learn and keep up. But they would still show up usually, because you get time off your sentence for showing up, but they wasn't learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've often likened it to a one-room schoolhouse challenge, where you've got all different types of learning abilities and kind of learning progressions, and then how do you as the single teacher navigate all of that, especially in kind of the historical offline world. So tell us then, once you're enrolled in that course, like, what type of materials would you have access to? What did you have to procure yourself? How new were they? Give us a sense of that.
Right. So we would get just the basics. And so, for example, like they provided computer repair classes, A+ certification, but we will work on really, really old computers. But we will learn the basics. And a lot of students, myself included, we wanted to get caught up with technology. And so we would have to order books. And the process of ordering books is like, you have to fill out a money order request, which probably take about 10 days for it to be processed, for it to go out. And this whole the turnaround process for this will probably be about 6 weeks. And, it took a long time for us to get our books. and also the average person in prison that I was in, or in prison in general, makes about 95 cents a day. And so you're making like $25 a month, and you have to balance, like, do I get this $13 book, or do I get my cosmetics, which will probably cost me $12? Do I get some food? Do I get my? It was a challenge for people to really like further their education. And most people just chose to, get some food or get the cosmetics and just not really pursue their education further.
Right. And talk a little bit about where some of the other areas where money would get consumed. You talked about phone calls. You tell a story in your book about that.
Right. So, I mean, it was very difficult. So again, like the average person in the prison that I was in, or in the state of Maryland, makes about $25 a month. And so just for one phone call, one 30-minute phone call was $10. And so most people would choose to get their cosmetics or get some coffee and stuff. And so this financial burden would lay on the families. And so the families would run up their phone bills in order to talk to their loved ones. But my family, once my phone bill got to like $800 a month, they just said, we can't afford to talk to you. And so they just blocked the calls. And so I actually went 6 years without talking to my family. It was a nightmare. And this happens every day. It still happens.
Yeah, it's devastating. And there's a question that's also come in about the college funding. If you want to talk a little bit about how you paid for college and also share a little bit about the Second Chance Pell for other incarcerated individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Second Chance Pell grant allow a few universities and prison systems to create sort of like an experimental college program within the prison. And so I was able to get into this college program. I barely made it in, but I got in, and it really like opened my eyes to the world and really changed me as a person. And, it was about 150 of us that got into the program. And actually everyone who went into the program, even people who got a little bit of college, are all home now and doing really well. And so it was a life-changing experience for me.
What people may not realize is that upwards of 64% of incarcerated prisoners in the state system are eligible to enroll in college programs, but about 9% of them actually will complete a college program. And so the demand and eligibility is quite high, but the access is quite limited. Talk a little bit about, too, kind of some of the predatory practices we're seeing today, even for those who aren't enrolled in a college program, but just trying to read books in prison and what's happening there.
Yeah, it's really crazy how prison has turned into a business and not actually correcting. Like, we call it correctional facilities, but most prisons aren't really correcting it. So these predatory companies come in with these tablets, and even with the, I mentioned earlier with the phone calls, and they're charging you to read books. They're charging you to communicate with your family. And I'm talking about like, $15 or, cents per page, and things like that add up. And most incarcerated individuals cannot afford it. And so their families have to incur like this debt. So it's just crazy.
What about access to technology in prison? What did you see? Did you have access to any connected devices or computer labs? And if you want to talk a little bit about your friend Steven and teaching himself.
So we didn't have access to tablets and technology when I was there. I wish I did, because I would have had more college degrees and learned more languages, like if I had it. But I met my friend Steven, who eventually became my mentor and like a godbrother to me. And we didn't have computers at the time. And so he was teaching himself computer programming, just writing on sheets of paper. And eventually we got access to the school through college, through a school lab. And he started teaching himself programming. And I just studied alongside him and studied business and just took college classes. But and he made it home too. And he started a software company.
It's probably self-evident when you say it, but correctional facilities were not designed with a wireless infrastructure in mind. And the correctional mindset of security and custody is limit access, keep control, and don't let anything that could but possibly lead to outside communication or access to resources on the outside. And I think further, when you look at correctional educational programs, the mindsets of administrators, it's not a data-driven mindset yet in corrections around where are our students, what do they need, what's working, what's not working. And so the lack of kind of robust digital learning, thinking, and infrastructure in prisons is very limited. In addition to the experience that we've seen, we've gone into prisons and you have people who've been incarcerated for 10 plus years, you show them a tablet computer, that's technology they've never experienced before. And so thinking about the learning curve and user needs to get up to speed on technology, if you haven't been interoperating with mobile technology on a day-to-day basis, as most people on the outside have been. Tell us though about the teachers you encountered and what challenges they face. What does it look like to try to be an instructor working with incarcerated students?
Right. And so I guess first I want to say that the teachers in the prison that I was in, like school in general was my sanctuary. Like everything was crazy in prison, but my teachers provided me a way to escape like mentally through education. And it was very challenging for them, because in the prisons, it's all about security and protecting the public. And so like if something happened on one side of the prison and the prison went on lockdown, the teachers wouldn't be able to get in to teach us. And so it was always challenging where, if we had classes Monday through Friday, maybe we'd get 2 or 3 of them of the classes. And it just was tough for the teachers. But that being said, they did a really good job, at least in the prison that I was in, by going the extra mile and kind of equipping us with like skill sets of like things that we can study if they didn't make it in.
Yeah. And so thinking about technology and some of the ways to rethink correctional education, some people point to the fact that, well, there are tablets in prisons now, the phone providers, the same ones who are charging you $800 a month for your phone calls, are offering these devices, and they'll say they have these free educational resources. Why is that not leading to better outcomes?
So like the truth is, these tablets that are being introduced, most of them are about making money. And so they may say, in order to get a contract, that we have like some educational programming on the tablets, but they're not good. They're not like really good educational programs. And most of it is like, entertainment stuff, download movies or like songs, and they'll charge you astronomical prices for this and then give the prisons a kickback. And so it's become like a business, and it's not really about, rehabilitation and providing like real education for folks to get out and be successful. And so like, that's the truth of what's really happening. And it's a serious problem here in America.
Right. And so thinking through about kind of where APDS is entering into this picture, we've taken a very different approach. So one, we never charge inmates or their friends and families for our technology and service. We contract directly with the jurisdictions. And what we've learned by taking that approach is when you're working directly with the program staff, you're building on a strategy, an educational strategy. What will your teachers do? What will your students do? How will that data come together to inform the decision-making? When you have a entertainment/transactional tablet, it's not about the educational strategy, it's about driving revenue through the transactions. What we've learned is it's not just about if you provide it, they will succeed. At what you've shared around your teachers, like that investment, that human relationship that you also have in addition to the access to the resources is so important.
Yeah, I agree.
So in terms of what we see is what APDS is trying to do differently, we talk about an individualized education plan and starting with that needs assessment and that intake process. So every time an incarcerated individual gets access to our system, we help them understand, so where are they? Have they completed their GED yet? Are they looking for different therapeutic, cognitive behavioral therapy options? What are their career aspirations? Or if they're unsure, how to help them explore. But going through a needs assessment in conjunction with the counseling and the case manager saying, hey, I know Chris, I know what he's working on, and I can help assign that content, and then start managing and tracking your progress through that pathway.
Right.
And then we're seeing the delivery of that high quality content being really important, so that you're getting prepared for the high school equivalency or getting access to the post-secondary programs. But then what we do with that data is provide a feedback loop not only to the jurisdiction, but to the individual for you to see, okay, my time spent led to this, this accomplishment, and here I am on my journey, and starting to help you see that effort leading to outcomes, and then for the jurisdiction to start seeing the data and the patterns over time of what is needed for the facility for the different needs in the population. There are a few questions that are now starting to come in through the chat that we can, one is, there's by law, don't prisons have to provide accommodations to students if they qualify, or is this not considered for the incarcerated individual?
I think just for juveniles, at least in the state of Maryland, if you were underage, like under 21, they had to provide it for you. Some chose not to go, but like they had to at least like provide access of that for juveniles. But otherwise, I don't think so.
Yeah, there are some accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act that they are supposed to provide. The question becomes, how can they? If they don't, depending on kind of how might they do that. And one of the things that we've seen with our tablet technology is we made a lot of investments around accessibility, thinking through the needs of low vision learners,
Yeah.
and other types of accommodations that are necessary that you can leverage with the computer-based technology to address. How have you seen COVID impact correctional programming?
So it's really bad, actually. I was just talking to some folks because it's very difficult to social distance in prison, and I think the solution for most of the prisons are to put people just on semi-lockdown, which is challenging because it's like it's additional punishment to be like in solitary confinement or just be locked in with your cell buddy, and it's something that's getting out of control. And if you look at the data too, I just saw something yesterday of like an increasing amount of deaths for prisoners around America because they can't social distance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge.
Right, and again, back to kind of where digital technology could really be helpful here is you now have an ability to both do synchronous instruction through video connection as well as asynchronous instruction with our platform to help manage that when your program staff is now being precluded from coming in and
Right.
movement is being curtailed inside the facilities.
Right. I just got an email from a teacher that teaches inside of the prison, and she said she hasn't been in months. Like they can't get in. So.
And just going back to your own experience, what is the impact when suddenly programming is like if a facility goes into lockdown and programming is curtailed for a week or more? What happens in the climate and culture in the housing units when that happens?
I mean, people like, at least myself, if I had books, I would just program on my own. I wish I had a tablet, but I would just sit in my cell and just go over my old work that I did from class. But honestly, like most students, if they couldn't get in the classroom, they just didn't do the schoolwork. They would play cards, they would talk on the phone. And so it was very challenging when schools were shut down. There was a lockdown or something. So I can't imagine what's happening now with COVID and how people are educating or going to therapy or just taking drug classes, like things that they need.
Yep. So there are a lot of questions around how colleges and universities can help overcome barriers. I think one note of context, it is worth saying that 37% of people in state prisons don't finish high school compared to about 19% of the general population. And in our experience, upwards of 80% may need some form of adult basic education or pre-high school equivalency as well. So there's a real need at the lower end of the learning curve, in addition to the post-secondary. But I'm curious, Chris, for you to share your thoughts first on what could you see colleges and universities doing more to help overcome barriers or improve access?
I think so. So that's a good question. So I believe that, especially now with COVID and these lockdowns and the uncertainty of the future, leveraging technology. So, even with the tablets, like colleges can, digitize their curriculum, put them on tablets. And even if they can't get in, I mean, there's ways for teachers, I mean, especially through APDS, where they can communicate with students and help them through their coursework without physically have to be in the housing unit. And so I think that's the wave of the future for students incarcerated to get a good education.
Yeah, and APDS is working with a consortium of community colleges in one state to provide programming inside the facility, working with different facilities in that state, with giving them access to the community college through our platform. I think it's also important for folks to realize that the barriers to access the Pell ESI, the Second Chance Pell, is significant, and there's been authorization to expand that, but until at the federal level we really revisit that, that's going to be a barrier in terms of helping fund access. Yeah. So are there other nonprofits out there that you see that work with prisons that provide books or technology to qualified individuals?
Yeah, so there are a couple. There are some organizations, Book to Prison, I think it's based in Boston. They do really good work. They've been around for about 40 plus years. We have Defy Ventures, who is a nonprofit. They have different chapters all over the country where they provide educational, entrepreneurial training to folks, help them learn how to start businesses and provide books and stuff for them. So, I mean, those are a few.
What are some of the misperceptions or prejudices that you have seen people who haven't been involved in correctional education hold about incarcerated students?
I think that most people who don't have any experience with this population don't really understand how most of the people who end up in prison have been shortchanged through their school systems and their communities before they got to prison. And so once they're in prison, they may have a reading disability because they went to a bad school. They may suffer from trauma because there was a lot of gun violence in their neighborhood. And so I think it's important for folks to be educated about the plight of folks who end up in prison and just try to look at it from a different lens. And that way they'll understand why people who've been shortchanged, once they're in prison, they should get an education. They should go through some therapy so that when they get out of prison, like they don't harm anyone, they don't commit any more crimes. And the money that we save by them staying home, we can put those into those broken school systems.
And then thinking about the post-employment opportunities for returning citizens, talk about the barriers and the stereotypes and prejudices that are encountered here.
So it's incredibly challenging to get a job when you come home from prison. And everyone who gets out of prison says that they don't want to go back and they want to get a job and they try, but it's incredibly difficult to gain employment. And how you gain employment is having skills, having something to offer a business or organization where you can work. And so, our prison systems should really be thinking about, education as a way to protect the public. Like when I was in prison, I always said, we got to keep the public safe. We got to, and if someone develops some skills or gets an education, they can come home, they'll have better odds. There's plenty of studies that support this, that, even a little bit of education would give you a better likelihood of gaining employment. And when people get jobs, they don't need to commit crimes.
Yeah. A lot of the research shows that participation in correctional education increases the likelihood of finding a job post-release by at least 13%. And as the video showed earlier, correctional education reduces recidivism by 43%. So the direct correlation between what the individual does while incarcerated and has access to and accomplishes, resulting in post-release outcomes, is critically important.
Yeah.
There's a huge demand, but not enough seats, and this is one of the ways where technology can really amplify the impact. Because if you're based on the paradigm of one teacher and how many people can be in that one programming area at a time, suddenly with the education platform with APDS that we provide, the idea is you can really amplify that access not just in the 1 hour or few hour of programming a day, but also the ability to take it back into the housing unit and continue that work going on. There's a question here: what barriers should APDS encounter when trying to kickstart the mission? What opportunities are being pursued to support the mission, and how might we be of support to incarcerated learners? So why don't I take the first part, and then Chris, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in terms of how others like who are participating in this conference could be support to incarcerated learners.
Right.
So for APDS, the first hurdle was the concept of bringing a digital platform into a correctional facility. It was an anathema to have a connected device. There was a lot of skepticism that it could be done safely and securely. But once we could prove that we could lock down the tablet device both physically and digitally, then it really became the challenge of helping them see how to unlock all the potential in that platform and use it effectively. You had to undo some legacy mindsets around what quality instruction looks like. And there's similar patterns that we've seen in K-12 as well, of what that instructional paradigm looks like, how to think about using the data. And then clearly the budget considerations, because we are not coming in a predatory model where we're going to charge the inmate or their families for our services. The jurisdiction is responsible for funding this, as the jurisdiction should be responsible for funding. This is a smart investment on the part of the state for its incarcerated population. And so finding that budget, finding both federal funds to tap into, state level funds to tap into, and then creating a virtuous cycle is where they see those investments leading to stronger outcomes to justify those investments is a lot of the work that we're doing right now. So now we're in a kind of point in time where the benefits are really starting to be seen, and hence a lot of the growth that APDS has been experiencing. But there's still some legacy mindsets out there that incarceration is punishment, that there's retribution.
Right.
And helping people understand that 95% of everyone who's incarcerated is going to be coming back into our communities. And what investments are we willing to make on a rehabilitation front to give them better options? So, Chris, from your vantage point, what are the types of things that you think this community of education technologists, investors, philanthropists could be doing to help for incarcerated learners?
So I think there's a couple of things. You mentioned earlier when you talked about mindset. And so I would encourage folks to adopt a particular mindset of, we're out here, we're taxpaying citizens, and so we finance these prisons. And so we want to return on our taxpayers' money, and we want to be safe. We want, good schools and want to live in a safe environment. We want our people who get incarcerated, unfortunately, to have an opportunity to be educated, or any deficiencies that they had that led them to prison. We want those to be corrected while they're in prison. And so that's one thing. The other thing too is, when we go out and vote, we need to be thinking on local levels, like our district attorneys, our judges, and people who have a lot of discretionary power to maybe not send a person to prison who has a drug problem. Let's send them to a drug treatment program, or a person who was really bright and made a mistake and maybe stole a bag of candy. Maybe they, do something different versus sending a person to prison. And so I just encourage people to really open their minds and think about this prison system, because it costs us a lot of money. We lock up a lot of people. It's decimating communities, mostly Black and brown communities. And this, we're better than this. And so I just encourage people to really have a different mindset.
I totally agree. And it is, especially in the conversations that we're finally having as a country around systemic racism.
Yes.
The structural racism is most apparent in our correctional criminal justice field, as you see the populations that we incarcerate, why we incarcerate them. The research has been unequivocal. Rand has done this, has shown that for every dollar invested in correctional education, the state will save $4 to $5 in the future by just in reduced recidivism and incarceration costs. So when we're working with jurisdictions and talking about what's possible through our platform and this investment, we talk about the example of for an incarcerated learner to begin progressing on his or her journey through high school equivalency, post-secondary job training, rehabilitation, that can translate into earned time credit, which will reduce the sentence. So therefore, you're already reducing the direct cost of incarceration by having a shorter sentence. As we know, that investment in education is going to lead to a higher likelihood for the returning citizen to get gainful employment, earn a living wage, find stable housing, and therefore reduce the chance that they will be rearrested. I think right now the stats are somewhere around 66% of returning citizens are rearrested within 3 years. Yeah. So reduce that, so then you're reducing future costs of incarceration as well. And therefore, that's how you create a cycle where you are breaking that revolving door of incarceration and setting up our learners for better outcomes in the future. Chris, I think somebody wants to know if you're on Twitter. Do you have your Twitter handle?
Yes, it's Chris Wilson Bolt. Chris Wilson, B-A-L-T. It's an abbreviation for Baltimore. So just as we wrap up in our session, I think just a few thoughts that I would share around what's needed going forward. As we said, 95% of our incarcerated population will return to our communities, and we need to dramatically decarcerate our country. That is unequivocally true. And so the question is, how are we going to prepare them for successful reentry? Are we making sure they're getting the therapeutic treatments they need if they're dealing with addictions, substance abuse issues? Are we giving them the educational preparation to be prepared for the types of job opportunities, especially in this environment where unemployment is skyrocketing, and suddenly if employers are choosing between someone who's been formerly incarcerated or someone who hasn't, it's going to make it that barrier even harder for that previously incarcerated individual. And so this idea of using digital tools combined with an instructional strategy to individualize that instruction, to provide high quality content, and training on how to, and training for the DOC staff on how to use and think about instruction and data to drive decision making, and then track and monitor the data to adjust that course. Is one key point that we think. Another thing I would really push, especially folks who are involved in policy making at the state level, is thinking back to a lot of the change that we saw with the No Child Left Behind Act in publishing, holding states accountable to publishing state test outcomes. And if we force our jurisdictions, our departments of corrections to publish their outcomes, then we can hold them accountable for the dollars that we are spending. And saying we want to see what types of high school completion rates and post-secondary completion rates and job preparation completion rates. And then we want to see what the post-employment outcomes are. We want to see what the housing outcomes are for our returning citizens, to really force that accountability and force a different type of conversation around corrections. And so if we do this right, like you said, people will be invested in their success, secure their earned term credit, and really improve the outcomes for the individual and the family associated with that individual most directly, as well as for our broader society as a whole. Right. Any closing thoughts on your part, Chris? I just encourage folks that are on this Zoom call to do some homework and really step up. We're living in a crazy time right now in America, but I also see it as an opportunity for us to work together and come up with solutions to really make things better. And so I just encourage people to do that.
I want to thank Chris, you in particular, for your time, also for your book. If you have not read Chris's book, The Master Plan, it is a powerful, powerful narrative around his experience. And I know it's changed my life, it's changed my family's lives as we read it. And it's changed a lot of men and women's lives who've been incarcerated as well. So put the Master Plan on your reading list.
Thank you.
And I also invite the participants in this session to reach out to us at APDS. You can reach me at harris.ferrell at apdscorporate.com. We're also on LinkedIn as well. So thank you all for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Nice. All right.